Number 3 is going to be discussion, preliminary zoning regulation change, Robert Grabarek, aggregate crushing operations. Bob, would you like to present to us about that?
Yes, I've got basically just a brief presentation because it looks like something that's worth doing. We'll put together a full application and go through the whole process. But essentially what this is about is one of my clients, Mr. Neri, has a yard. He's got a contractor storage yard operation there in business. And he went in about 2 years ago, I guess it was, and went to get the aggregate processing operation approved, which he did. And the only issue that we have with it is while the contractor's business and storage yard is a one-time approval, similar to Stop and Shop or something like that, the aggregate processing comes up every 5 years. Which may not seem like a big deal, but if you have a business owner that's potentially looking at entering into a moderately long-term contract, say 2 years, you've got a approval for a 1-year period, and you have to guess what your price is going to be for the services as to whether you will have the ability to process aggregate or whether you're going to have to send the aggregate out somewhere else. I've been dealing with this in a number of locations. Most recently I've been doing a lot of work for the town of Fairfield, and they have that exact same issue. It's my understanding that Bridgeport has a large O&G yard, and they're being closed out of that business. So essentially, as an example, we have the town of Clinton. The town of Clinton has a DPW yard, and they let out contracts to people to mill and repave roads and parking lots and things like that. I suspect our school board is the same thing, because that just comes from Fairfield. So you've got a contractor saying, I'd like to give you a price for doing this, and if they have the ability to process and recycle aggregate, they can provide one price to, say, the town of Clinton. If that's up in the air in the second half of their contract, it brings in a certain level of uncertainty and makes it more difficult for them to conduct their business if it's up in the air. So when we came in for the last permit, there's essentially 2 things in the town regulations. One is section 10.52, which is contractors, business, and storage yards, which is a permanent thing. 10.53, the following regulation, is for excavation, grading, and deposit materials, which is more typically a limited duration type of operation. We have people that come in and they want to remove materials from their property. They have larger rocks, they want to crush them, things like that. You know, they're pulling a limited amount of material out of the property, and so a permit like that is appropriate. The other probably larger one in town we have is Shumack. They have mining operations there where they're actually pulling materials out of the ground, and they're, as far as I know, a 5-year basis. But then you have a contractor's yard where their normal operations are storing materials, including aggregate that they may have milled for the state of Connecticut, the town of Clinton, private owners of driveways and parking lots and things like that. And in order for them to move that material on, they don't want to be storing it on the yard, forever. They need to process it. They need to mill it, grind it, and mix it in with other materials, so they have now a recyclable product that they can use and dispose of. And in doing so, that allows them to provide a lower cost alternative to the potential purchasers of their services. And as I said, that particular yard that I'm referring to at this point is a contractor's business and storage yard. They do have an aggregate processing operation on there, and all we're really looking at doing is kind of addressing the regulations. So not only does 10.53 have an aggregate processing operation allowed, but we'd like to have something as 10.52, which also has that on the regulation, so they can just do it on a continuous basis rather than you're wondering every 5 years, will we get approved again or not? And we're not looking at something that would be, primarily a large piece of property that processes aggregate. We would still like it to be incidental to the primary use of the contractor's business and storage yard. So I think based on a review of the regulation, based on the operations that I see in town here, it's something that's worth pursuing, that seems like it would be an easy fit under the zoning regulations for the minor change. And so that's what we're hoping to come in front of you with at some point in the near future and get accomplished.
All right, does anybody have any questions for Bob? Sure.
Do you know why we have the 5-year term on it?
I believe that the reason for that is because the nature of that operation is temporary. If I'm digging a hole in the ground, I'm not going to be digging forever. We don't have any tilcons in the town of Clinton that are just taking down a hillside and processing for the next 50 years or something, and putting things on barges to go to Long Island. In the town of Clinton, the type of operations we have are small size, limited operations that people can normally accomplish in like a year or 2 years at most. So they have a 5-year permit for it. Again, the only thing that I can see in town that's different might be something like Shumack, where they're actually mining a large quantity of material. They dig ponds, they do some processing, and then they supply aggregates to contractors who need it to build parking lots and roads and things like that.
And what would be the reason why the town would ever say no to that permit?
We don't know. I mean, stranger things have happened. And,
Well, the commission is not stranger. I can guarantee
Well, I
that.
would disagree.
So you're saying we don't
We-
have any sense that?
We have a history of turning down things that should be no-brainers. For instance, we just currently turned down a guy who just wanted to deposit wood chips and pick them back up and send them out. So if we're going to turn down a guy who just wants to put some wood chips on the ground, why wouldn't we turn down a guy who wants to process aggregate?
So basically,
five-year
public
thing.
should not have any trust in commission, is what you're saying?
No, it could be a completely different commission in 5 years from now.
It might not be.
It's not you.
So what?
Well, here's one thought. I mean, if someone is going to build and going to put in and buy equipment, they're going to finance the equipment. They might need to finance the equipment over 7 or 8 years. But what happens if in 5 years they have a 7-year lease and in 5 years they find out that
That's a fair comment. So that's what I was trying to get to. Rather than going to different commissions, that the commission itself doesn't make any sensible decisions. So I think that's pushing the envelope here. But I'm just trying to figure out why we have a 5-year term
Okay,
and what would be the concern of the applicant
okay.
to think that 5-year could be.
When we applied for the permit, we didn't think the operation was something that fit under 10.53. We did it because the town said, we would like you to do this. We already have the contractor storage yard nailed down. It's there. It'll be there for the foreseeable future. We felt that the processing operation was a part of that contractor's business and storage yard. But there was some disagreement, and we said, okay, rather than fight it with this commission or whomever, we'll just apply for that permit for the short term, get the 5-year permit in place, after which point in time we can address this issue, because we really didn't feel it was appropriate to be under 10.53, because it's not the title of 10.53 is excavation, grading, and deposit of materials. So excavation, grading, and deposit is basically developing a piece of land, whereas this is just taking materials that would normally go into a contractor's storage yard, not pulling out of the ground there, they're just taking millings, putting them on the truck, bringing them here, and then you have to somehow put them somewhere else. So rather than putting them in a landfill or doing something else as a final disposal, there is the option of recycling them and bringing them up to a Department of Transportation specification, and then they could be reused. So.
I guess what I would say is that you're sort of falling into a category halfway in between
Yeah.
those two.
Yes,
Because storage yards, as we define them, are really for storage, not for processing or otherwise turning one thing into another thing. While the earth excavation piece does talk about turning one thing into another thing, but it doesn't talk about the crushing operation that particularly caused the heartburn last time. So
Yeah,
we may need to
yes.
create a new category,
Ah.
which may have its own special exception for
Okay.
processing yard,
yeah,
which will allow you to do the sorts of things you're doing there,
right.
which you don't think are one or the other. We need a new category which is specifically for bringing things in,
Okay.
transforming them into something else, and then shipping
Recycling
them.
them, yeah.
Okay?
All right, so we can talk to Eric and try and, yes.
Our regulations, 1052-2E, say the processing and/or stockpiling of earth products. Aren't you talking about processing of earth products?
Right, yeah,
So don't the regulations under special exception R allow that in the contractor storage yard?
that's kind of what we thought. But,
I guess, to the extent that he needed a crusher, and our regs don't specifically deal with,
How else do you process material? By hand and mix it up in a pail?
That's what I think.
if the commission's interpretation is that 1052, or even the new reg, the new 12.
I agree, it's not a well-defined area in the current regulations.
You guys control your own regs and your interpretation of the regs. If your interpretation is that you think that category covers it right now, or you would like to work on clarifying that reg a little bit to make sure that it does so in a better way, I'm okay with that. But that's not how we were interpreting it before, and again, the commission changes and the interpretation changes, and that's fine, that's why. So, this may be a situation where we want to ask regulations to either say that this is what they think of the current reg does now, or maybe tweak the language of that a little bit to specifically include, processing shall include the following things, just so we know exactly what processing includes, and then we don't have to fight about it.
I brought this up in this meeting before, because the other strange word is the excavation of materials. I'm in the business. Excavation of materials really usually implies that you're excavating something that is probably an untouched area, or an area like a pond that is filled in. If you're processing equipment on your own site, it's not excavation. Just by pure definition
It is
of
for them.
what excavation is. No, it's not even.
It is for them.
It is.
It is for them,
Right.
right, excavation.
Right.
I'm saying in a contractor storage yard, when you bring,
Right.
let's say you bring in a pile of material,
Yes.
and you want to process that material.
You're storing it.
You're not excavating.
Right, you're just storing it.
After you dump it, and then you go and you put it in whatever you put, you're
Right.
still not excavating.
Correct. Yeah, that was our interpretation too, but in order to circumvent it, we went through and got the permit for the, 5-year thing for processing. And now that we're into it and, we're just doing our thing, we would just like to,
It just seems like some of our regulations, we always say, well, what's the what is the definition? It's not our definition, it's the Webster's dictionary. I mean, some of it is a gray area where we have to kind of come up with the definition.
yeah.
Some of it is, like excavation.
Right, so we're basically happy to do whatever you'd like us to do. We would just like to solidify this and, just make it so, we're not wondering in a few years what's going to happen.
Tom, you got a question?
Yeah, so maybe, I just heard there was a heartburn previously. You said something about heartburn.
Okay.
So is there a history that I'm not aware of?
When Alan Neri came in, this is all connected to Alan Neri's project.
Right,
And
there are others in town though, so.
I know.
The
I know
issue
that.
came up, would he be allowed to bring on a crusher on site? Because he doesn't have material on site that he's excavating, that he's crushing. So the question is, would he be allowed to bring material from off-site, on-site, to crush it, and then do something with it, whether it's recycle or whatever he's going to be doing with it? And it wasn't clear in our regulations that we had a slot for that. So we basically had him come in, say, as an accessory use to what he was doing, we would let him do that, and then we approved the permit on that basis. Now, part of this is also that there was this issue where, for a while, we were issuing something called special permits for excavation and processing of that sort. We don't issue those special permits anymore. We only have special exceptions. And special permits were, by their nature, defined as limited in scope to 5 years. So we sort of changed the category from special permit to special exception. We didn't have a precise change in the regulations that matched that. So Alan Neri got sort of caught in this no man's land a little bit.
Okay, now
Okay.
I'm picking on it. So I think definitely as running a business, you special permit and special exception is a big difference. And that's a little dicey when you get into special exception piece. And I guess on the other point that what you were making was it needs to be defined a little,
Right.
Much more cleaner
Yes.
terminology. As Gary picked up on excavation, bringing a product from out there, that shouldn't be called excavation. That's not excavation.
So it
That's
sounds
what I
like our
read.
definition
It
needs
does
to be,
call out excavation in section 52, that's section 53. I mean, 10.53.
Yeah.
52 doesn't say
Okay,
excavation.
well,
it says
again,
stockpiling or
So,
processing.
52 and 53.
we've got to make it clearer,
Yeah.
clarify it. We have two options, a couple options we could do. We're going to ask John Guskowski to write the regulation for us, and Bob Crawford to do it and present something to us, or we could send it just to regulations and have them get it taken care of.
Is that something that the consultant can work with the applicant? The applicant's professional
Yes.
staff or whatever.
We could do that. We could ask
We'd be
John.
happy to, yes.
All right.
I
If
think
you're
that
good
would be
with
much
that,
more
I think
productive.
that's what we'll do. If
Okay.
that's good, then we'll have John Guskowski work with you to clarify that and bring it before us.
Okay, I'll get in touch with Derek tomorrow and he can arrange where we need to do
Yeah.
it. We'll just go forward. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.